All right, so I'm going to go ahead and get started with my presentation here. So my name is Abby. I've been an AE here at Design Point for a year now. And within the last few months, I've been starting to dabble in SolidWorks Inspection. And so I'm excited to share what SolidWorks Inspection could do for you if you're not already using it. And if you are already using it, then you'll see some Excel template tips that I have for you guys. If you do have any questions throughout the presentation, please just post them in the questions section of the webinar, and then I will get to questions at the end of the webinar. Alrighty. So SolidWorks Inspection, it's broken into three main parts for this presentation, but the software itself is broken into two main parts. So the very top section, I have SolidWorks drawings, and that's because Inspection has an add-in that comes with SolidWorks, and we use that for SolidWorks native drawings, so the extension .sld_drw. In addition to that, we can also use Inspection on PDF and TIFF files, which we use in a separate standalone inspection application. So we'll take a closer look at that then. And lastly, we're going to be covering some template tips. All right, so we're going to start with the SolidWorks drawings in the add-in. So I'm going to go ahead and pull up SolidWorks. All right, I already have my drawing loaded and I have all of my dimensions set up ahead of time. So I'm going to go ahead and start my new SolidWorks inspection project. So I have this tab activated through the add-ins. Choose new project, and I'm going to choose the template that I want to use. So on the left-hand side here, I can add properties to this project. It automatically fills in these three for me. I could change those if I wanted to, but those seem correct. So I'm going to move on to document name. And what you can do is you can click on this and tie it to an existing custom property that exists within one of the referenced files. So you can choose a custom property from this drawing, from the model that it's referencing, or even from one of the configuration specific properties. So for this example, for document name, I'm going to choose the configuration specific description, and it fills that in there for me. And then of course I can also manually type things in as well. If there is a custom property that I want to add that I don't see up here, I can choose from a list down here. I will go for material, and then same thing applies here. I can grab it from one of these, or I could type it in myself. Now, if you commonly use material or any other custom properties, you can add that to your template. So that way, you don't have to keep re-adding them every time. Down here, we have some additional settings that we can use. I just want to make sure that this auto balloon is on because that's where the magic happens in this product. I can choose what types of dimensions I want the system to automatically balloon for me. So in this case, I'm going to tell it to balloon everything. And lastly, I can set up my tolerance settings. So I currently have it set to by precision, and it's going to look at how many decimal places that dimension has, and therefore what are the upper and lower tolerances going to be, both for linear and angular. I could do this by range, again, both for linear and angular, but I'm going to stick with precision. So once I hit this green check, it's going to automatically populate these balloons across the entire drawing. All right, and it's already done. So you can see how quick that was. I just had to set up a few settings, and then it automatically grabs all of those dimensions and associates a balloon next to them. So if I zoom in, you'll see sometimes it's not quite so tidy, but I can just easily move these around to make it look nicer. I can modify some of these balloons. So for example, say I wanted to bring attention to a key dimension, so one that's important, I can select each dimension and say, this is a key dimension. And now notice it changed the shape of that balloon for me. So now your attention is brought to that balloon. You have to pay more attention to it. All right, so you'll see that all of my characteristics, all of my balloons are also loaded up here in the top left. So I'll expand this a little bit. All right, so you'll notice if I click on one of these, it's going to highlight in the drawing view where that dimension is. In this case, it's not a dimension, it's a note. And notice that the system recognizes that. Under type, it has note. And then if I were to go to number 4 here, it does recognize this is a dimension. And in number 5, it actually recognizes that's a whole callout. So the system it's pretty smart. All right, so once I'm happy with what it looks like, I can export this to a PDF, which is essentially just a screenshot of what we're looking at now. I can also export this to Excel, and I'm just going to use this template, and it's going to ask me where do I want to save it. I'll specify that this has been ballooned. All right, so this is creating an Excel document for me, and this Excel document can be customized to fit your company's needs. And that's what we're going to be getting into a little bit more in section 3 of this webinar. But essentially, what you're looking at is pulling from an Excel template. And in this template, I've called out the part number, and notice it brings in that information for me. Same with the part name. I have all of this linked. And over here, we have all of the requirements, so basically the characteristics that it pulled out. And then it also grabs those upper and lower limits for me. And these are automatically calculated in Excel based off of the tolerance settings that I had set up when I was first creating the project. So now what the cool thing is within Excel is I can enter results into the results column. And once I do, I can get that automatic feedback if the result has passed or failed inspection. So green for pass, red for fail. Again, this can be customized within the Excel template, which we will talk about a little bit later. In addition to this sheet, it does have other sheets, again, that can be formatted to what your customer needs. But nonetheless, this is what we wanted to highlight here. All right, so I'm going to get out of this and hop back into the PowerPoint. All right, so with the SolidWorks native drawings, you can see how it's got that seamless integration because it's a SolidWorks drawing. We're using it in SolidWorks. You saw how quickly all of those balloons were formed for us, and then we can export that to Excel. So it's a very seamless workflow that we have. We can also do a very similar thing with PDF and TIFF files. As I mentioned before, this is going to be in the separate inspection standalone application. And this comes with your seat of inspection. So it's not an additional charge that you have to pay. For every seat of inspection, you also get a seat of this standalone application. So let's see what that looks like. All right, here it is. Interface is obviously a little bit different. But you can see on the left-hand side here, we have a very similar looking interface as what we did in the add-in. So I have my custom properties that I can add up here. I could manually type those in, or I can use this little lightning bolt symbol. And this uses OCR recognition. So it basically takes a screenshot of whatever you highlight, and then it extracts data from that screenshot. So I'm going to zoom into the title block. All right, and for part name, I'm going to use the description. So I hover over that or create a box over that, and then it automatically grabs the text from in there. Same thing, I can do that with part number, or like I said, I can just type it in as well. Same thing down here. If I don't see everything I need up here, I can add it in this second section. And then I also have the sampling settings that we also saw within the SolidWorks add-in. All right, so I'll say, okay, I've got those settings set up, and now I'm ready to go ahead and get started with starting to add the balloons. So it is a slightly more manual process within the standalone application because we're dealing with PDFs and not the native SolidWorks file. So I'm going to focus my attention in the top left here. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with this 160 dimension. I'm going to use the Smart Extract tool to go ahead and grab that information. And now you'll notice it recognizes that this is a dimension. More specifically, it is a length dimension. And this information is pulled from the screen capture that I just grabbed. It comes back with the nominal value in addition to the upper and lower tolerance. And then based off of that upper and lower tolerance, it calculates the upper and lower limits for me. And then I can just keep chugging along here. I can grab the next one and it does the same thing. And notice it keeps a record of everything I've done so far. So down here, I have the list of characteristics that I've created so far. And as I highlight those, it points those out where they are in the drawing view. So now let's say I had something a little bit more complicated. Whoops. I'll head over here. So this one, for example, is actually 2 dimensions within one annotation. So I'm measuring a linear plus an angular dimension. So I can tell the software there's going to be multiple characteristics here. I'm going to highlight this. And now notice it has both 3 and 4. So 3, it picked up that 1.5. And now you might be wondering, well, where did this plus and minus tolerance come from? Because it didn't specify that in here. Well, that's because that is a setting that we have on the document template level. So down here, I've got my precision. This is a 1 decimal place, so I have a tolerance of plus or minus 0.3. So that's where that comes from. All right, lastly, I'll show extracting notes. So there's a specific command for that here just to help with text rather than numbers. And there you have it. If I expand this, it has them broken into 3 separate sub-characteristics. Now, these could be customized, so you could have a separate balloon for 5.1, 5.2, 5.3, or you can just combine it into one. It's pretty customizable. The balloons, again, can also be customized here. You can customize the shape and even the color in here. All right, so again, once we're happy with what we have, I could go ahead and export this to a PDF. I'll go ahead and do that for this one. All right, so there it is. And again, I can export this into Excel. Now, the Excel document that it's going to bring up is actually referencing a different template than what the add-in, the SolidWorks add-in Excel document had been referencing. They are 2 different Excel templates that you have to set up. Each program uses a separate type of Excel document, or excuse me, Excel template. All right, so you can see it's grabbing actually the image capture itself within the requirement field. That's an option that you can have. You'll see that some of these are a little bit smaller, a little bit bigger. That's something that we're going to be talking about in section 3. But I want to show you that the same thing will happen here if I type in results. Let's see here. Doesn't seem to be working right now, but the same thing would happen where it would come back red if it was a failed dimension and green if it had passed. Alrighty, so jumping back into the PowerPoint. So like I said, there's no extra charge for that. It comes with your seat of SolidWorks. You do not have to have SolidWorks on that computer in order for this standalone application to run. It can run on its own separate from SolidWorks, so that's great for a computer in the quality department or something like that. So you saw we had that OCR engine, which allowed us to take a screenshot of numbers or text, and then it went ahead and grabbed that data for us. And then, of course, the quickest part about this is creating that Excel report. Additionally, if you have another revision that comes in and you have to make changes to the balloons, what you can do is overlay the new revision with what you currently have, and then you can just point out the differences and only change the balloons that have changed. You do not have to redo the entire thing when only a few things have changed. All right, so now we're going to move into templates. And like I said, there are two different templates. There's one for the add-in portion, and then there's a separate template file for the standalone. So I'm going to start with the add-in. So I'm going to head back into SolidWorks. All right, now in order to access the template editor, in this case, it's up here, Launch Template Editor. Then it's going to ask me, what template do you want to edit? So this one. All right, this box pops up, and you want to keep that there because that is how we're going to reference custom properties from the file and insert those into the Excel document. But before we get there, I just wanted to point out that I have this photo in here that was done just by a simple insert pictures. Something as simple as that, adding your company's logo, can customize your FII report. All right, so getting back into this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a column for key characteristics. As you saw in the add-in portion of the webinar, I pointed out how we can, well, I'll just pull it up here. We can make a characteristic marked as key, so it brings more attention to it. Currently, within this Excel document, I don't have a column for key dimensions. So I'm going to go ahead and insert a new column, give that a heading of key. And now I'm going to select the first cell of this column, and then I'm going to come over to my right and reference my template editor. So you'll see I have different selections here. I can grab a custom property from the model itself, from the drawing file, from a characteristic token, which is actually what we're going to be using, or we can also reference it from a document token. So like I said, we're going to be referencing a characteristic token here. Notice I have key, and then I say insert. And once I say insert, it automatically adds this code for me that's going to link the information from the inspection file into the Excel report. Now, we only have to apply it to this top cell because we have this option selected, vertical base template. That means that the code is going to apply to the entire column. If we had this one selected, horizontal based, then that means the code would apply to the entire row, left to right. So we want to make sure that we have this as up and down. All right, so we've got that in there. I'm going to go ahead and say finished, and it's going to ask me where I want to save this. I'll just save over that. All right, so now I'm going to go ahead and create another Excel report. This time I'm going to reference the template that I just created. So I'll browse to that, and I'll just specify this, that this has the key dimension. All right. Oh, sorry about that. I think I forgot to check a certain box. Yes, forgot to activate this one. Save over this one. Let's try this again. All right, so now I have my key column here, and notice it shows as false if it is not a key dimension and true if it is a key dimension. So this can be kind of a headache looking through all of this false and true. So there's two ways that you can go about making this a little bit easier on yourself. The first one is you can color code this column just like the results column is color coded. So to do that, you highlight the cells that you want to format, come up here to conditional formatting, and down to manage rules. So this is going to allow you to see all of the rules that exist on these cells. Currently, there are no rules that exist on these cells, so I'm going to say new rule. And for this example, I'm going to use this second option, format only cells that contain. And then down here, I'm going to specify that this is going to be revolving around specific text. And then I'm going to say this text would contain, in this case, it's going to be the word false. So when the cell contains the word false, what do I want it to look like? So I select the format button, and then I can change a lot with the cell formatting. I could make the entire cell a certain color, or I can just change the font. So that's what I'm going to go with. And for false, I want it to be red. So it gives you a preview of what that's going to look like. And I'll say OK, and I'll say apply. So now notice it changes all of these to red. And then I'll do the same thing for true. So this time I'm just typing in containing true, go to my formatting, and I'll select green for this one, and apply. All right, so now it's a little bit more obvious. We've got red, and then we have one green, so this one kind of stands out to me. But maybe you don't want to waste the ink. Maybe you just want to have an X in that column if it's true, marking that, that it is true. And then you just want everything else to be blank if it's false. So how can we do this? We can't change that formatting in the existing key column. So what we have to do is actually create a new column right beside that. And again, I will call this one key. All right, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to use an Excel formula to format this. So in my formula bar up here, I'm going to type in equals if, parenthesis, and then I'm going to select the cell itself directly to the left of that says false. So I'm telling it if this cell equals true, so that would be the text that's located in there, then I'm putting a comma, a space, then a quotation mark to mark the start of what I want the text to actually say if it is true. So if it's true, I want it to just be a capital X. And that's the end of it, so I'm going to end that with another quotation mark. So I'm saying, if it's true, give it the letter X, but I also have to tell it what to do if it says anything other than true. So I'll put another column or comma and a space. And then I'm going to put two quotation marks with nothing inside of them. So essentially that means it's going to be blank. And I just have to end it with my parenthesis. And I'll say, OK. So notice nothing comes up here beside false, and that's because I don't want anything to show if this says false. But if I drag the formula down to populate to the entire column, now you'll see I have one X here beside the true value, which is what I wanted. So now what I can do is I can just hide this column, and this information will remain. Just make sure you don't delete that column, because then that would therefore mess up this formula and it wouldn't work anymore. So those are a few ways that you can get the results you're looking for if you don't want to see all of that false and true. All right, and then of course I just made these changes to the final Excel document after I had opened it. In order to save this change so that it applies to all Excel documents that you make in the future, you'd want to make sure that you go in through the template editor here, and you would do the exact same thing, and you would just save over that template so that the changes apply everywhere. All right, I'm going to get out of this one, and I'm going to head back into my standalone application just to take a look at a few settings in here. All right, I'm actually going to get out of this project, and I'm going to open a more complete one. Has some more dimensions entered into it. All right, so what I'm going to do again is I'm going to export to Excel. All right, and one thing I wanted to point out is down here, include document snapshots. So that's essentially going to paste like a PDF of the drawing on the Excel document. And I think that this can be helpful because then that way you don't have to have two separate files open. It's all within the Excel spreadsheet. So you just have to check these on or off depending if you want the sheets on there. And let's go ahead and create it. That's fine. All right, so here was the Form 3 that we had been looking at, and here's the work this time. I think I had a different template selected the last time, but it automatically fills in those cells for me. But then in addition to that, it adds these extra 2 tabs or sheets for me, and it has the, like I said, essentially the PDF on the Excel sheet itself. So I think that can be helpful. One other thing that I wanted to point out is, so these screen captures, notice they really are basically just like photos in here. There's a setting that you can change before exporting to Excel that can either help you out or really mess you up. So let's take a look at that. All right, so I'll export to Excel again. It's under the imaging dropdown here. So currently it's set to fit image to cell, which is the preferred method. If you select fit cell to image, then depending on how big the image is will then affect how big your cell is. So it can be, well, you'll see, it just gets a little bit out of hand. So I'm gonna go ahead and create this and save it as something else. All right, so now you'll see that the cells are huge because of that option that I have selected. Who knows, maybe this is your preferred method, but I would say that the recommended option is to stay with the other ones so that the cells aren't quite so big and it's a little more uniform. All right. So templates are great because they're extremely customizable, anything from the font that you're using to the custom properties that you are entering into the templates. And of course, you just modify them once and then you can reference them from time and time again. So they're really helpful and I recommend taking advantage of them. All right, so I'm just going to quickly check to see if we have any questions in the webinar. And let me look at one more spot here. No, okay, I don't see any. If anybody does have any questions, feel free to reach out to our support team. I have our email and our phone number there, and I will get those answers to you right away.